Talk about Middle East policy. Move to Palestine and Israel. There you have not just sort of good Arabs and bad Arabs. You have good Palestinians and bad Palestinians. And some of the folks who are good Palestinians today were bad Palestinians yesterday. Help us sort this out.
Well, my book deals with the Arab-Israeli conflict mainly as an element in some of the other issues that I talk about. But it is the case that the United States and Israel were at one point eager to split the Palestinians, and there's evidence that in the late 80s the Israelis supported the religious group Hamas against the more secular PLO, which was then seen as more dangerous. And this split has now developed so that the Hamas has Gaza, the PLO has the West Bank. There's not one voice for Palestinian politics. And while that may seem as though it benefits Israel, in fact, not having a unified voice to negotiate with means that no movement can be made on the peace process.
We've hit on a lot of the hot spots in the news right now, but your book also, smartly, talks about Pakistan and relates some of the history of the U.S. role in that part of the world. As we watch the headlines today, protests against poverty, protests against state removal of the highest the highest judges in the court system, what are you looking for? What do you think are the important developments for us to keep our eyes on? Because it's easy to get distracted by threat. Is it all about threat to the U.S.?
Well, actually, Pakistan is an interesting case where I think the United States should have the courage of its convictions. If we say we want democracy, then why do we keep supporting these military dictators in places like Pakistan? General Pervez Musharraf made a coup in 1999. He was forgiven for making the coup. He was given over $10 billion in aid by the Bush administration. And then when he was forced to resign by an elected parliament under threat of impeachment, the U.S. media and pundits seemed to see this development as threatening in some way. I mean, why was that a bad thing to have a popular movement for political representation of a civilian sort come to the fore and the military to go back to the barracks? This seems to me a wonderful story. And we just saw another chapter of it whereby the populace really forced the government to reinstate a Supreme Court judge that, and the rest of the Supreme Court, that the General Musharraf had dismissed in a very high-handed dictatorial way, and he was a dictator.
Well, the argument the United States government, successive governments have made has been, well, we have to support stability at all costs. And if you were really to let this democracy thing out of the bag, this isn't the part that they say out loud, but if you were really to let that out of the bag, you might have those scary religious extremists coming into power. Aren't they a threat?
Well, in Pakistan, the religious extremists have never done very well in elections. And in fact, when the Pakistani public was able to go to the polls and vote freely, and I think fairly last February of 2008, the biggest party in parliament was the Pakistan People's Party, which is left of center and relatively secular. And the second biggest party was the Muslim League, which is more conservative. But the fundamentalists collapsed in that election. So, I mean, I think people should just trust the Pakistani public. They seem to actually have their heads on straight.
But hasn't somebody decided to hand over vast regions of that borderland between Afghanistan and Pakistan to religious groups, to entities like the warlords and the Taliban?
Well, what happened recently was actually in the Swat Valley, which is in Pakistan proper. It's in the Northwest Frontier Province, and not in that federally administrated tribal area. There's 13 tribal agencies that are kind of like American Indian reservations. But in the Northwest Frontier Province, there was a small set of counties that were a source of endless trouble and rebellions. And the demand of the people who were making the trouble was that Islamic law be implemented locally. And the newly elected provincial assembly of the Northwest Frontier Province, which is kind of secular Pushtun nationalists, they negotiated with those locals and said, look, if you stop making trouble, we'll let you arrange your local affairs in this way. But it would be as though the U.S. government allowed some counties in the Deep South to practice a biblical lifestyle.
Maintain gender segregation. Well, shut down women's schools.
That's not part of the deal. That is to say, what was acknowledged was Sharia. Sharia doesn't forbid women's education. Now, if local people interpret it that way, that's a problem. But that's not the provincial government didn't give away women's education as part of the deal. But it is troubling. It's a troubling development because the people that they were negotiating with were among those who had founded the Pakistani branch of the Taliban, have been involved in violence, have been in jail, and so forth. But you know, you only really have two alternatives in a situation like this, where there's constant turmoil. One is to send in the army and beat people over the head and try to make them obey the center, or negotiate with them, see if you can't give them something of what they want, and see if that doesn't calm things down.
Juan, Cole, we've only got about 30 seconds left, but while your book is titled Engaging with the Muslim World, what I'm hearing a little bit is sort of let them be.
Well, certainly we've taken over 2 Muslim countries, fairly big ones, and we've dictated to a lot of others. And it's backfired on us in a big way. And I think more willingness to listen, more negotiation, more settlement of disputes through compromise, however distasteful sometimes the compromise might be, would benefit us more than the military path.
Juan Cole. Informed Comment is the website, the blog. The book is just out March 17th. We'll have information about how to get your hands on the book and more about this website at our site, GRITtv.org. Juan Cole, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you.